This is the easier-to-read version of 1984 by George Orwell, retold and narrated by Sarah Simpson. Part 2, Chapter 5. Winston's friend Sim disappeared that summer. One day he was at work, the next day he was gone. On the first day, a few people noticed he was missing. By the second day, no one noticed anymore. When the list of chess club members was printed that week, Sim's name wasn't on it anymore. It was like he had never existed. It was the hottest part of summer. Inside the party buildings, the air conditioning kept the temperature cool, but outside the sidewalks were so hot you could feel them burning through the bottoms of your shoes. Everyone was busy getting ready for Hate Week. In the fiction department where Julia worked, they stopped printing novels for the proles and printed flyers describing all the terrible, evil things Eurasia was doing to the people of Oceania. Winston's work was busier than ever, since he had to help make sure that all the old news articles of the inner party wanted to quote on their Hate Week speeches matched what they wanted to say. After work, Winston and every other member of the party spent the evening putting up decorations and making signs for Hate Week. Winston's co-worker, Parsons, was in charge of a lot of the decorating, and he stomped around happily wearing shorts. There was nothing else Parsons would rather be doing than sewing banners and putting up posters. Winston hated sewing banners and walking around putting up posters in the summer heat. Another annoyance was a new song the music department had written just for Hate Week. It sounded more like soldiers' feet stomping as they marched than music, but the proles and the party members all seemed to love it. Everywhere Winston went that summer, the song was playing or someone was singing it. In addition to the new song, more bombs than ever were landing on the city, making even more noise. One bomb fell on a movie theater, and 200 people were crushed to death. Another bomb landed on an empty lot where children liked to play, and dozens of children were blown to pieces. Even bigger bombs were hitting areas outside the city. The party didn't share any information about the bombings with the people, so everyone was worried that things were going badly with the war against Eurasia. The propaganda department had designed and put up a new, very effective poster that got both the proles and the party members stirred up and angry about the war with Eurasia. The poster was huge, 4 meters tall, and showed a scary-looking Eurasian soldier pointing a gun. The poster was designed so it looked like the gun was pointing directly at you no matter where you were standing. It freaked people out, and it made them yell and scream about how important it was to fight against Eurasia and win. Even the proles, who normally didn't care about the wars, were full of patriotism, thanks to the new poster. People made effigies, big stuffed dolls like scarecrows, to look like an old traitor against the party named Goldstein. People blamed Goldstein for anything bad that happened, even though he had been dead for decades. They set the effigies on fire and cheered. They tore down many of the posters of the Eurasian soldier and burned them too. People worked themselves into a frenzy. They looted stores. When a rumor started going around that there were spies telling the Eurasians where to drop bombs on Oceania, an old man and woman had their house set on fire after a neighbor said they might be spies. They weren't spies, but they died in the fire anyway. In the middle of all this misery and hate, Winston and Julia met secretly in the little room above Mr. Charrington's shop. With all the extra work for Hate Week, it was harder than ever to sneak away, but they still managed to meet 7 times in June. Their visits had started to follow a pattern. They'd arrive, take off their clothes, make love, take a nap, then talk. The room wasn't perfect. Even though they hadn't seen another rat, the bedbugs were terrible. They didn't care. The room was an island of safety and happiness in a sad, crazy world. Whenever Winston went to meet Julia, he stopped to talk to Mr. Charrington. The old man was happy to have someone to talk to. Most of the time, Mr. Charrington was totally alone. He rarely went outside, and there weren't many customers at his shop. He liked to show Winston the old things in the shop, a locket with a clipping of hair inside, the lid of a pretty box, a candlestick. Mr. Charrington was no longer trying to sell these things to Winston. He just wanted to show them to him. Winston realized that Mr. Charrington's shop was more like a personal collection than an actual store. It was filled with old things from the past, and Mr. Charrington felt it was his job to appreciate and take care of them. Winston noticed positive changes to his mind and his body. He had stopped drinking gin all the time. He didn't feel like he needed it anymore. He was gaining weight and looked much healthier. The varicose vein above his ankle was healing. He wasn't coughing as much. Winston knew that all of this was because of the time he spent with Julia in their special room. Now that he was happy, at least sometimes, life didn't seem so bad. Even though they couldn't meet every day, he felt happy knowing that their special room was there waiting for them as soon as they could get away. Both Winston and Julia knew that it was only a matter of time before they were caught and killed. They were taking a huge risk meeting in the same place over and over again, but neither of them wanted to give it up. They lay in bed holding one another, knowing that every time they met could be the last. At the same time, when they were actually there in the room, they felt safe. At least for a little while, they felt like life could continue this way forever. Winston would stare at the paperweight and imagine that he and Julia could climb inside and live there. They talked about the future. Maybe they could run away and hide among the proles. They could create new identities, work in a factory, and be together. Maybe they could run away from Oceania and start over someplace else. Maybe Winston's wife Catherine would die. They could find a way to get married to one another. They could both kill themselves. Winston knew that they would never attempt any of these plans. Human beings have a strong will to survive, and they would never put themselves in danger, not even for a chance at happiness. Sometimes Winston and Julia talked about open rebellion against Big Brother and the party. They heard about a group called the Brotherhood, who met in secret to make plans to overthrow the government. They talked about joining. However, this was another plan they would never actually put into action. Neither of them had any idea how to find the Brotherhood, even if they were serious about wanting to join it. He even told her about O'Brien, the inner party member he thought might feel the same way he did about the party. Julia just laughed. She assumed that everyone secretly hated the party. They spent more time together talking. Winston started to understand the ways in which he and Julia were different. He remembered a time before the revolution, and he remembered the difficult early years of the party. All of the rules and ministries that seemed so old and established were really only about 30 years old, and Winston could remember all the fighting and changes that led up to things being the way they were now. As a result, Winston could imagine a future where something else came along to replace Big Brother and the party. It was different for Julia. She was younger than Winston, and Big Brother and the party were all she had ever known. To her, they seemed permanent and unchangeable. She did everything she was supposed to do, but she didn't know why she did any of it, nor did she care. During the 2 minutes hate, she screamed louder than anyone about Goldstein, but she didn't even know who he was. She screamed because that was what you were expected to do, and if you did what you were expected to do, it would be easier to sneak around and do what you actually wanted to do. No one would suspect you of being a person who would break the rules. The government couldn't be changed, so people had to do what they wanted secretly. Julia had grown up with propaganda and hate week. They were just stupid traditions to her. They didn't mean anything. Winston was shocked by how willing she was to just accept whatever the party told her unless it applied directly to her own life. Big Brother. The party invented the airplane. Julia. Okay. Big Brother. Oceania has never had an alliance with Eurasia. Julia. Fine. Winston couldn't get over her accepting that Oceania and Eurasia had never been on the same side in a war. That had only happened 4 years ago. Julia was an adult then. Surely she could remember that. It took an hour of convincing for her to remember. Even then, Winston wondered if she was just agreeing with him to shut him up. It worried him that she was so willing to go along with such a big public lie just for the sake of convenience. If people like Julia, who didn't even believe in the party, weren't willing to stand up to it, who would? When Winston told Julia about the hard evidence he found proving the party lies and changes information in the historical records, the photo of Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford, he expected her to be shocked and excited. She wasn't. She didn't seem to care. So what, Julia said. Everybody knows they change history all the time. But I had actual proof, Winston said. I don't know why you're so upset about it. You didn't even know those men, she said. That's not the point, Winston said, trying to explain. The point is that the party changes history every day. No one in the future will know the truth of anything that happened. Everything they will learn will be lies. The only thing people in the future will know is that Big Brother is always right, but he isn't always right. If Big Brother was always right, we wouldn't have to change the records all the time. I had evidence in my hand, and I threw it away. Maybe if I'd kept it and showed it to people, they would have started to see the truth about Big Brother. Maybe they would have started a rebellion and everyone's lives would be better. The future would be better. Julia laughed and pulled him close. I don't care about the future, she said, kissing him. I only care about me and you right now. Winston kissed her back. You're only a rebel from the waist down, he said, laughing. Winston cared about Julia. He liked being with her, but he was shocked by how little interest she had in challenging the party's very obvious lies. Julia knew they were lying, but she didn't care. To her, standing up to them was pointless. It was better to stay alive, pretend to believe everything the party told her to believe, than quietly do what she wanted in secret. That was the difference between Julia and Winston. He wanted more than a secret life. He wanted more than pretending he agreed with a corrupt government. Winston didn't want a better world just for himself. He wanted a better world for the people who would come after him. Winston cared about the future.